The laughter struck her before the pain did. They pushed Leela Stone through the stable doors like she was a sideshow act. Her boot snagged on the wooden threshold. She crashed hard into the straw, the sound reverberating across the sweltering, deserted farmstead. Dust swirled around her face, her cheeks flushed, but the giggles from the girls behind her stung deeper. "Go on, tough gal," one of them jeered. "Show the farmer what you're built for." The doors banged shut. Quiet. Only the summer breeze and the steady thud of boots. Leela raised her head, coughing, bits of straw caught in her hair. In the doorway stood a man, wide shoulders, rugged face, sunlight cutting across his chin. A horse whinnied beside him. Jack Harrow. Every tale in Willow Bend branded him cruel, the farmer who broke spirits, who sacked 3 hands in a single week, who once hurled a pail through a wall. Now those icy blue eyes were locked on her. "What in blazes are you doing in my stable?" His voice was coarse, like stones crunching. Leela's throat seized. She tried to speak, but only a gasp escaped. Her palm throbbed from the fall. Her pride ached worse. I was sent to tidy." "Sent by who?" She looked down, her voice barely a whisper. "The lodging house?" He stared at her for a long, weighty moment. Then he laughed once, short and sour. "They sent you." Leela nodded, shame burning hot behind her eyes. "Get up," he said, "and get out." Her chest constricted. She wanted to flee, to disappear, to be anywhere but under that gaze. But then she thought of the girls, the way they snickered when they shoved her out the door. The matron's warning, "No work, no bed." Her knees wobbled as she stood. Her palms were bleeding. She looked at him, voice quivering. "I need the job." Jack's eyes narrowed. "You need it that bad?" "Yes." A silence settled between them, heavy as the dust. Finally, he pointed toward a broom. "Then work. No chatter, no griping, and don't cross my path." Leela nodded. Her hands shook as she grabbed the broom, its handle coarse against her skin. She took one step, then another. Her body throbbed, her heart heavier than the bucket nearby. When she knelt to scrub the floor, pain surged through her palms. She bit her lip, muttering through gritted teeth. "It stings. It's my first night here." Jack paused. His jaw twitched. He said nothing, but his gaze lingered a moment longer. Outside, the sun melted into the dirt path. Inside, a girl who never fit in took her first stab at self-respect. She didn't know it yet, but this stable would change everything. And when night fell on Willow Bend, one question lingered. Would the man the town called a beast become the first to see her value? The first day should have crushed her. The sun was merciless, hanging low and crimson over Willow Bend. The stable reeked of dust, sweat, and something like old resentment. Leela's hands were already raw, but she kept sweeping. Each stroke of the broom felt like hauling the weight of every harsh word she'd ever heard. Jack Harrow pounded fence posts outside. Each blow was sharp enough to jolt the air, but he hadn't glanced her way since dawn. Maybe that was a kindness, maybe not. When she paused to catch her breath, she glimpsed her reflection in a water bucket, hair plastered to her forehead, dirt smudged on her cheeks. The kind of sight that makes small-town girls giggle for weeks. Still, she smiled faintly because the floor beneath her was spotless. From the doorway, Jack's voice came low. "You missed a patch." She flinched. Her heart nearly leapt from her chest. "Yes, sir. I'll fix it." He didn't yell. He didn't mock. He just turned and walked off, boots heavy in the dirt. For a man rumored to have a temper like a tempest, he was oddly calm. When the heat peaked, he returned with a tin cup of water. "Drink. You'll collapse if you don't." She hesitated. "I don't want to bother you." "You already are." But he was a hint of something gentler in his tone. She drank, the water cold and sweet against her parched lips. For a moment she forgot the laughter, the pain, the shame. By the dusk, the stable glowed golden under the fading sun, tools aligned, straw neatly stacked. For the first time in her life, Leela felt proud of her own 2 hands. Jack stepped in. His boots echoed on the clean boards. He glanced around and nodded once. "You did all this?" "Yes, sir." "You're still here?" "You told me to work, so I worked." He didn't yell. He didn't mock. He just turned and walked off, boots heavy in the dirt. For a man rumored to have a temper like a tempest, he was oddly calm. When the heat peaked, he returned with a tin cup of water. "Drink. You'll collapse if you don't." Leela hesitated. "I don't want to bother you." "You already are." But he was a hint of something gentler in his tone. She drank, the water cold and sweet against her parched lips. For a moment she forgot the laughter, the pain, the shame. By dusk, the stable glowed golden under the fading sun, tools aligned, straw neatly stacked. For the first time in her life, Leela felt proud of her own 2 hands. Jack stepped in. His boots echoed on the clean boards. He glanced around and nodded once. "You did all this?" "Yes, sir." "You're still here?" "You told me to work, so I worked." He didn't yell. He didn't mock. He just turned and walked off, boots heavy in the dirt. For a man rumored to have a temper like a tempest, he was oddly calm. When he turned to leave, she whispered, almost too soft to hear, "Thank you." He paused for a second, then walked out into the dimming light. Leela stood in the doorway where the day began, where she'd fallen in the dirt. But now her hands were blistered, her back sore, and her heart oddly light. Maybe she wasn't the laughingstock they claimed. Maybe she was someone worth keeping. The night breeze carried the faint chirp of crickets. Somewhere inside the house, a lantern flickered on, and for the first time, the farmstead didn't feel so lonesome. But she didn't know that town was already whispering again, and the next sunrise would test her harder than today ever did. Will she still stand tall when the laughter returns louder than before? So, before we go on, take a sip of your tea, lean back, and tell me, what time is it where you are, and where are you listening from? If you're still here with me, don't forget to tap that subscribe button. We've got more coming, and trust me, the next part will tug right at your heart.
The next morning came soft, but trouble never stays quiet long in Willow Bend. Leela woke before dawn, hands still sore, back still aching. She pulled on her work dress, tied her hair back, and stepped outside. The air was cooler than yesterday, gentle like the hush before a storm. Jack was already up, splitting wood near the house. He glanced at her once, nodded. No words, just a small sign she belonged here, at least for now. The tasks came quicker today, feeding horses, mucking stalls, hauling water. Leela worked steadily, no complaints, just the rhythm of her breath and the scrape of her boots. When she bent to lift a straw bale, her fingers slipped. The whole thing toppled, nearly crushing her foot. She gasped. Jack turned at the sound, crossed the stable in 3 long strides. "You trying to lose a toe already?" She laughed, breathless. "Guess I'm still figuring it out." He knelt, adjusted the bale, his hand grazing hers for a split second. "You'll learn faster if you don't get yourself hurt first." His tone was gruff, but something in his eyes wasn't. For the first time since she arrived, Leela saw him, not as the harsh farmer, but as a man who'd been alone too long. His face looked weary, but not unkind. The day wore on. They worked side by side, not talking much, but the silence between them started to feel natural, easy even. Then came the voices, laughter, sharp and cold, slicing through the afternoon air. Leela froze. Outside the gate stood the girls from the lodging house, the same ones who'd sent her here. Their fine dresses and cruel grins looked out of place against the dust and fences. "Well, look at her," one called. The big helper girl probably smells worse than the horses." Leela's throat tightened. Her hands began to tremble. Jack stepped out from the stable, hammer in hand, his voice low and steady. "You girls got business here?" They glanced at each other, smirking. "Just checking on our friend. Your friend's working. You're bothering her. We'll leave when we're ready." Jack took a step closer. His eyes darkened like thunderclouds. "You're ready now." No one laughed after that. The girls turned, muttering as they walked away. The wind caught their skirts and the dust swallowed them whole. Leela stood in the stable doorway, heart pounding. "You didn't have to do that." He shrugged. "Yeah, I did." For a long moment neither spoke. Then Jack said quietly, "Folks around here forget what real work looks like, but I don't." The words sank deep. Maybe too deep. Leela looked away before he could see the tears in her eyes. And as the sun dipped behind the hill, one thought wouldn't leave her mind. Why did it feel safer standing beside the gruffest man in Willow Bend than anywhere else in the world? By the end of that week, the whole town was buzzing. Every table in the tavern hummed with tales about the heavy girl still working at Jack Harrow's farmstead. Some said he pitied her. Others said he'd gone soft. A few snickered, saying she was probably warming his bed. Leela didn't know the details, but she felt the stares when she went into town for supplies, the whispers, the smirks. Back at the farm, she worked harder hoping sweat and silence could drown out the gossip. But news travels faster than the wind in Willow Bend. That evening, as she swept the porch, she heard hooves, 4 of them. The sound made her chest tighten. Trouble had a rhythm, and that was it. 4 men rode up, grinning wide. Nate Carver led the group, his voice thick with liquor. "Heard you got yourself a new maid, Harrow." Jack stepped out of the stable, wiping his hands on a cloth. "You boys lost?" Nate leaned on his saddle. "Just checking on you. Word is you're keeping the lodging house joke all to yourself." Leela froze, her heart hammering. The broom slipped from her fingers. Jack's face stayed still. His voice dropped low. "You done talking?" Nate laughed. "Oh, come on, Jack. Look at her. You really expect us to believe she's here to work? She works harder than any man you've ever met." "Now that's a stretch," another man muttered. Jack stepped closer to the gate. "You say one more word about her, and you'll be picking your teeth out of the dirt." The smile vanished from Nate's face. The others shifted uneasily in their saddles. "You defending her honor now?" Nate sneered. "I'm defending what's mine." The words hung in the air like a spark in dry grass. Nobody spoke, even the horses went still. "Well then," Nate spat into the dirt, "your funeral, Harrow." The men turned their horses and rode off, dust rising behind them. Leela's eyes filled before she could stop them. "You didn't have to do that." Jack looked at her, voice steady. "Yeah, I did." "They'll talk. They'll say worse now." "Let them." He turned toward the stable, then stopped. "I stopped caring what this town thought of me a long time ago." Leela watched him walk away. For the first time in her life, someone had stood between her and the world, not because he had to, but because he chose to. That night she couldn't sleep. The words replayed in her mind. "I'm defending what's mine." Did he mean it? Or was it just a way to silence them? She didn't know yet, but the next visitor to the farm would give her the answer, and it wasn't one she was ready for.
The next morning came quiet, too quiet. Leela woke to the sound of hooves again, but this time it wasn't drunks from the tavern. A carriage rolled through the gate, and sitting tall inside was the matron from the lodging house. 3 girls rode behind her, the same ones who'd laughed the loudest. Jack stepped out from the stable, jaw tight. The matron didn't waste a moment. "Mr. Harrow, I've come to take the girl back. She belongs at the lodging house." Jack crossed his arms. "She belongs right here." The matron's face twisted. "She's a charity case, not a farmhand, and she won't ruin our reputation by staying with you." Leela stood frozen. Her heart beat so loud she could barely hear the rest. Then Jack turned toward her, voice softer. "What do you want, Leela?" Every eye was on her. The girls, the matron, even Jack waited for her answer. She took a shaky breath. The same girl who once hid from laughter now stood tall in the summer sun. "I want to stay," she said. The matron gasped, "You can't." Jack stepped closer, his tone firm. "You sent her here as a prank, but the prank's on you. I found someone worth keeping." Leela blanked back tears. He looked at her again, voice low, real. "You're not a joke, Leela. You never were." The matron climbed back into the carriage, face burning. The girls were silent now, their smirks gone. When the wheels rolled away, all that was left was wind, dust, and the quiet sound of a new beginning. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. The farmstead changed with the seasons, and so did they. She learned his silence wasn't anger, it was memory. He learned her laughter wasn't weakness, it was strength. Somewhere between the chores and the quiet suppers, love grew steady, like roots under the summer earth. Leela turned to Jack, words trembling. "You really meant that? You'd keep me here?" After that day, time began to stretch softly between them. They started eating supper together under the glow of a kerosene lamp. Jack spoke of the wife he'd lost to illness years ago. Leela shared the nights she wept alone at the lodging house, praying for someone to see her as more than a burden. The space between them slowly turned into warmth, and when he finally spoke again, his voice was steady, full of something new. He nodded. "If you'll have me, I'd rather you stay, not as a worker, but as my wife." They both knew love wasn't fireworks. It was choosing each other every morning, no matter how hard the day got. Her breath caught. The girl they mocked, the girl who once fell in the dirt, now stood on the same porch where she'd been sent as a joke. She smiled through tears. "I will." Jack reached out, rough hands gentle now, and pulled her close. For the first time in years, his farm didn't feel empty, and for the first time ever, she wasn't alone. The same stable that once echoed with anger now hummed softly with life. Years later, when neighbors spoke of the Harrows, they didn't talk about the prank that started it all. They talked about the love that outlasted gossip. In the stable that still smelled faintly of straw and second chances, sometimes life sends you pain to lead you to where you belong. Sometimes the cruelest joke turns into your miracle. So tell me, if someone once made you feel small, did you let them define your worth? Or did you keep standing until you found your place? If this story touched your heart, give it a like and hit subscribe. It helps this little farm of stories keep going. Now, take a sip of your coffee, or maybe your tea, and tell me in the comments, what time is it where you are, and where are you listening from? And maybe that's what love really is. Two people who once stood alone, choosing to build a life strong enough to weather the dust, the gossip, and time itself.